Well, we're still waiting on the full NBA schedule to be released today, which will know exactly where the Chicago Bulls are going to play their full schedule. The NBA Cup schedule was released yesterday, and the Bulls Cup opponents are going to be Boston, Atlanta, Washington, and Charlotte. And that's just not 4 random games. That's a mini lab to test everything and how this rebuild is going. And I really like those matchups. We're going to talk about why those matchups each are important and what they could tell us about the Chicago Bulls rebuild. We're also going to talk about Patrick Williams being labeled as one of the worst contracts in the NBA and how the Chicago Bulls could potentially lose Donovan Atwell before he even actually gets to training camp. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go into this content for today, y'all. I want to start off with the NBA Cup, and I think the Bulls NBA Cup group is a perfect rebuild test for them. Well, and I'll explain that as we go through this episode, but I do think the Cup games against the Celtics, the Washington Wizards, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Charlotte Hornets, this is going to be a really good, when you look at it, Chicago may be looked at, and probably to a lot of people's estimation, is going to be looked at as the underdog against all 4 teams. But that's going to make this group even more useful for the Chicago Bulls. This is a perfect group to test the Chicago Bulls in their process along this rebuild. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is how the Chicago Bulls could, this team, especially with Caleb Wilson and Modest and Josh Giddey, could force Bryson Graham to be a little bit more aggressive. And I think this group that we have right now is going to be there, right? This could give the Chicago Bulls a real answer even before Thanksgiving on how far this team has really made it. So I want to talk about what each of these matchups bring to the Chicago Bulls, what they could tell us about the Chicago Bulls as we go through this matchup, and what's the thing to look out for. Let's start off first with the Boston Celtics. While the Boston Celtics have gone through their own changes this offseason with Jaylen Brown now with the Philadelphia 76ers, Paul George now with the Boston Celtics, they also added Mitchell Robinson at the center position. I think that this is a really good opportunity to see how Chicago can survive and perform against a former elite team that could still very well be elite in many areas this year, has elite coaching and a legit superstar. Boston is not a rebuilding peer for the Chicago Bulls. While they are retooling their roster, they're not in a rebuild, right? This is a matchup that tests the gaps between an unproven team in the Chicago Bulls and a proven Eastern Conference powerhouse in a way, right? And even without Jaylen Brown now on this team and many people looking at Boston like they're going to take a bit of a step back, there's still no denying that they're miles ahead of where the Chicago Bulls are in their rebuild as well. So I think when you look at this matchup, something that you're looking for in this game is especially how Josh Giddey can still push the pace against this team. Can it work when Boston puts pressure, especially tries to force the Chicago Bulls in the half court? One of the things that the Boston Celtics have been one of the best teams in the league at over the last handful of years is that they operate in the margins. They do what they do at an extremely good pace, an extremely elite level, while taking away what other teams do and what their best thing is. Also, Norman Powell's ability to create offense when the half-court offense breaks down. That's going to be a really big test in this one. And then also Nick Claxton switching and his rim ability is going to be really important in this one. It's going to get tested immediately in a matchup like this. Like, how well does Nick Claxton switching, his rebounding, and that rim protection really helps this team? Boston is a team that's not going to ask the Chicago Bulls if they're ready to win the East, right? That's not what this is about. But it is asking how far away are they from one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. But I also think the matchup of Modest and Caleb Wilson against the Boston Celtics forward and wing combos, that is going to be a fun matchup to see how that works out. Because, listen, especially when you look at how they've typically been with the Boston Celtics, right? Having the defenders that they have there, having the switchability that they have there. So now you're going to be looking at this. Boston is going to force Caleb and Modest to win with skill, playing strong, and operating smart. Because, again, the Boston Celtics are a team that's going to try to take away the margins from you. And if you allow them to do that, that's going to be there, right? Can you create offense when the first action breaks down? That's what Boston is really good at. They take that first action that you try to go to, and they take that away from you. If you're able to operate in that, that's going to be really, really beneficial for the Chicago Bulls. This is where the hype of the Bulls young forward combo has to meet real NBA pressure. And that's going to be the thing that you have to look at for this game. Boston is going to tell us if Caleb and Modest are just exciting young forwards, or are they forwards that are going to be able to make good teams uncomfortable early in this whole process, right? Like, and again, in anything that I'm saying, I'm not saying that you need to judge the Chicago Bulls overall rebuild forever by these things. I'm just saying that these are things you definitely can look at in these specific matchups, and they're kind of like check-ins on where we're going. And then you look at it and say, hey, we didn't match up well against Boston. How do we go back into the lab? How do we fix that? Because these are the type of matchups we're going to have to really live within and be much better at. I think that's an important part for the Chicago Bulls. So can they do that? Can they do it consistently? That's what we're going to have to see from the Bulls in a matchup like this. The next game, the Atlanta Hawks, right? The Atlanta Hawks are a really physical team. And especially for the Hawks having Jalen Johnson and stuff like that. We'll get into the specific matchups. But I do think Atlanta's going to be another team that tests how well the Chicago Bulls deal with physicality. This is an Atlanta Hawks team that I tell you what, with their acquisitions that they made this year, they can throw long, physical defenders at Josh Giddey, at Caleb Wilson, at Modest Buzelis. Like, these are players that have had trouble dealing with physicality at points in their NBA careers. When you look at all the different defenders that they can throw out there, Dyson Daniels, Lou Dort, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, right? These are all players that put tons of pressure on the ball and out on the perimeter and can switch, right? So one of the things that we've talked about could be a strength of this Bulls team is their natural switchability. That's already a strength of this Atlanta Hawks team, and the difference is the Hawks have proven to do it before, and they added proven championship-level players like a Lou Dort as well in regards to that, and Aaron Wiggins for that matter, right? So you're looking at this one like, how well can we protect the ball against the Atlanta Hawks? Because that's how the Hawks like to play. They're going to try to get after, force bad shots, force turnovers, get out in transition. That's going to be a really big thing here in this one. Can we get into the paint consistently against the Atlanta Hawks? And can we punish defenders for going under screens? Because they're going to go under a lot of screens and test the Chicago Bulls' willingness and ability to shoot effectively against them in that game. And that's going to be important, right? If Josh Giddey controls this matchup, this is going to be a serious sign of his ability to operate this offense with this new team. We talked about yesterday how I took a little bit of issue with an article that kind of try to whittle down Josh Giddey's playmaking ability to his two-man game with Nikola Vucevic. But in a game like the Atlanta Hawks, Josh Giddey and Trey Jones's, for that matter, ability to create for their teammates is going to be really important for this game, right? This is the type of game where the Josh Giddey conversation gets real on his ability to run an offense, his ability to deal with that physicality, all the different wing defenders that they're going to go. But that's not the only one. I'm really looking out for the Caleb Wilson versus Jalen Johnson matchup in this one, or the Modest Buzelis versus Jalen Johnson matchup. However, Tiago Splitter decides to draw that matchup up, it's going to be really important for the Bulls in this one, depending on what they do there. So I think when you're looking at this one specifically, Jalen Johnson is going to give Caleb or Modest Buzelis a more physical, established forward, and with his ability to also run the offense. The fact that so much of their offense goes through Jalen Johnson is going to be a really important part in all this too, because if Caleb and Modest can defend Jalen really well, you can disrupt their whole offensive flow and game plan, which gets really creative in that part, right? And then also, this is going to be one of those matchups too. Like I said, you're going to have to see a lot of players go under screens against the Chicago Bulls. So Caleb Wilson and Modest Buzelis' shooting is going to be tested in a matchup like this one, right? And so this is a big matchup where it's like, it's not about necessarily dominating those matchups, but it's how well you adjust, right? And so when you're facing teams with other athletes, and that's a thing for like Caleb Wilson too, like young college players, they're so often, able to use their athleticism and their strength, and you face off against players much more consistently in the NBA that are strong, fast, and just as big as you. And so that's going to be a really big matchup for Caleb Wilson in that regard too. Like, and the Lou Dort part of this, like how they're going to use Lou Dort, whether it's going to be like Lou Dort can guard Josh Giddey, he can guard Norman Powell, he can guard Modest, he can guard Caleb Wilson. Then you look at Nickeil Alexander, he can guard the other one. So this is a matchup where I'm really excited because, I would love to be in the spot that the Atlanta Hawks are in, meaning that the Hawks were a team that, they made the Eastern Conference Finals like a handful of years ago. They got knocked down. They built a new young core that was fun, exciting, all those type of things. And, their future's bright in the Atlanta Hawks. So this is one of those matchups. Again, this is not a team that's in a rebuild. This is a team that's in the refinement era of the development, and they're trying to get to that next step. It's a big evaluation year for them too. So those forward matchups I'm really looking forward to against this Atlanta Hawks team. I think that's going to be big in that regard. The next up, the Washington Wizards. This is rebuild versus rebuild, right? Which young foundation looks more coherent? There's a lot of kind of similarities, right? Like while the Washington Wizards have, of course they got AJ Dybantsa. That's already going to be fun. AJ Dybantsa versus Caleb Wilson. But then this is a team that also has youth, but they also have key veterans on this team, right? They have Chris Middleton. They have Anthony Davis. They have Trae Young on this team, but they still have young players in Bub Carrington, Trey Johnson. Of course, I just said AJ Dybantsa, right? So this is a nice young of young and old in regards to this one. And so they have high-end talent in veterans, and they have young, very promising players and young talent as well. So the biggest storyline, of course, in this one, though, is going to be Caleb Wilson versus AJ Dybantsa, the number 4 pick versus the number 1 overall pick. That's going to be the biggest reason a lot of people are going to watch this matchup, right? And the goal isn't necessarily to crown who's the better player in one game, but it is looking at seeing, hey, who has the more physical readiness, right? Who has more creation, who takes more advantage of their team, right? This is a big measuring stick game for the young core of the Chicago Bulls, and this is like much of this matchup in the NBA Cup. You want to look at how you measure yourself against this, right? Washington, of course, has more names on their team, right? So for whatever that's worth, but this isn't about the names because we're trying to develop our own names. I like the matchups in this one. I like how can bore out. And again, you still have I didn't even mention Alex Sarr, who's still on the team. Keyshawn George is on this team, right? So they have really good young players, and they're supported by those veterans. Now, how much of those veterans get in their way of the young players' development? Because I don't think they have as much synergy as the Bulls team does have, as far as like Bulls have veterans that are there to support the development. Washington has veterans that are there to be the offensive system in a lot of ways. So we'll see what's going to happen in regards to that one. But I do think that's a big part of it. Then also, I'll say this, right? Nick Claxton, Miles Buzelis, and Caleb Wilson, how do they deal with the size that the Washington Wizards have? They have a really a nice amount of size in that front court, right? So, one of the things that we have talked about, like the Bulls added more height, but Nick Claxton isn't the biggest guy. The Bulls added more toughness than Caleb Wilson. He's still very slight as far as the weight of guarding more elite NBA power forwards. And Miles Buzelis has had a problem with dealing with physicality. How well do we rebound and how well do we get on the glass in these matchups are going to be really important. But I also think Jalen Smith's shooting is really going to be important in this game too, coming off the bench for this team as well in that big rotation. So this is a team that, the Bulls want to be big. They want to be long. They want to be athletic. And Washington is going to say, are you strong enough in this matchup? And I like that matchup for the Chicago Bulls. Next up, the last team in this NBA Cup group, and that is the Charlotte Hornets. This is the floor test for the Chicago Bulls, right? This may be one of the most important matchups basketball-wise in this entire thing. Charlotte's not Boston, right? They're that. They're closer to the tier that Chicago's on than anything. They're that tier that the Bulls, next tier that the Bulls need to pass, right? The Hornets have shooting, they have creation, they have young wing talent. And of course, when you're looking at Kobe White, Brandon Miller, right? Con Knipple, how he can test that Bulls offense, all those type of things. If the Bulls get outclassed in this matchup against the Hornets, it's going to say a lot about where we are right now, right? Of course, the Kobe White return angle is one thing as well. We'll talk about that. But like the Bulls have to, I think in this matchup, look every bit as organized, every bit as talented. And if they can do that, the expectations start to shift for the Chicago Bulls. Charlotte is not a ceiling test, right? That's not what they are. They are you ready to pass that next tier test? And we'll see, right? Of course, the Kobe White revenge angle is a big part in this one. Like, that's going to be an angle in this one. And don't overlook Kobe trying to drop 40 on us as well, right? He knows Giddey. He knows Modest. He knows a lot of these players as well. He knows how to attack the defense when he gets hot also, right? So you know that the game against Kobe White is going to hit a little bit different because that's important. So let's bring it all together. What does the NBA Cup actually could tell us about the Chicago Bulls? A, Boston, the ceiling. Atlanta, more identity matchups and how you deal with physicality. Washington, the development, right? Two mix of young cores with veterans. How do you match up in that one? And then Charlotte. Could you be ready to pass that next tier where people have you at? Those are the kind of things. The final record is going to matter more than the NBA Cup record, but the process matters as well. And that's what the NBA Cup could tell us about the Chicago Bulls. It's about the process. Does the starting five work? Can the Bulls defend good teams? Can Modest and Caleb create as much offense and defense as they need against higher tier opponents? How does Josh Giddey look against different style, more physical defenses? And does Chicago look like it belongs against other play-in level teams? That's what this is going to tell us, play-in and playoff level teams. This is a 4-game test tube laboratory, whatever you want to call it, and the record's going to matter, but I think the answers and how we play within those are going to matter a little bit more. So let me know what you guys think on that part down below. With that, let's go ahead and move on. Patrick Williams, right? Patrick Williams was recently called one of the worst contracts in the NBA, and I don't see how anybody could argue with that. We know Patrick Williams is a bad contract, right? When Patrick Williams initially signed that contract, look at the number, and I said the number isn't bad, especially if he performs as a two-way player, 3-and-D player. But unfortunately, Patrick Williams did not perform as a 3-and-D player. He's gotten worse as the thing goes on. I'm still amazed that Patrick Williams has so many Patrick Williams truthers in the Chicago Bulls fan base that really think that Patrick Williams is all of a sudden going to turn into something differently than what he is. But like we talked about many times before, this new era, this new coaching staff, he has an opportunity to show it. But this is it. Like, this is it. If Patrick Williams is still trash this year, all those Patrick Williams truthers that are still holding on, I need y'all to stop. I need y'all to stop. I need y'all to move on. I need y'all to find a new angle, because if he can't excel in this one, for a new coach is looking for somebody to just step up, if he gets passed up by another crop of young players yet again, then it's over with. It's done. But the question many people are asking themselves is, what can the Bulls, if anything, do with the P. Will contract problem, right? Here's the thing. I think there's a couple of realistic paths of what the Bulls can do with Patrick Williams' contract. Path 1, attach draft capital to be able to move him. Now, with 3 years left on the contract, personally, I think that if you're attaching draft capital to Patrick Williams, aren't going to be able to move him for just a bunch of second-round picks. It's probably going to have to be maybe a protected first-round pick. That's it, right? And that's it. But I think that attaching any type of draft capital just to remove a salary that isn't, you still have max level cap space this upcoming offseason. I think that could be too detrimental for a young rebuilding team. I know people are going to say, but Haize, I'm tired of seeing Patrick Williams. Oh, well, you're going to have a player on the end of the bench. It doesn't matter. He's not getting in the way. If you move Patrick Williams and have to attach a serious draft capital to him, that gets in the way of your rebuild. That's taking assets away that can go towards your actual rebuilding, and you don't do that just because you're tired of looking at a player that can just sit on the end of the bench. Part 2, you can put him in a role where he can rebuild some value. Now, here's the part of this that I think of it, right? Now, if Tiago Splitter determines that the value that Patrick Williams brings to the court, the 3-and-D role, whatever you want to call it, is worth playing him. If he earns a role, nobody should be mad at that. But what I don't like and what I would never settle with me is giving him a role just because of his contract. That's not what I want to see from Patrick Williams. Let him earn a role. If he earns a role, great. No harm, no foul. If on top of earning a role, he can rebuild some trade value that you can either move him at the trade deadline or in the offseason, even better, right? If Patrick Williams defends in space, which is something that he did his first 2 years in the league, if he learns to play better physicality, if he shoots the ball more consistently, great. But if he doesn't do those things, let's be real. Patrick Williams could be out of the rotation, $18 million contract or not. The Bulls don't need Patrick Williams to become Kawhi Leonard anymore. That's done. That group that was running the team that hoped that, they're done. They're gone, right? They could use him to become movable, though. And we'll see, right? But I disagree with any type of notion that the Bulls should play Patrick Williams just to raise his value, because guess what? If he's playing like ass, he's not raising his value. Play him if he earns a role. Then, thus, through that, it could increase his value over that. Giving him minutes that potentially to block other young players that have more of a potential. And here's the thing. I don't even care that Dalen Swain's summer league was terrible. Dalen Swain's a rookie. I'd rather invest in that than just give Patrick Williams minutes just to try to increase value that's unlikely to increase anyway, right? You have to prioritize your young players that you see development fit for first. If there's minutes after that, great. But I think even Leonard Miller has earned a real chance over Patrick Williams. You cannot give Patrick Williams minutes because of the size of his contract. You can't do that. You don't play Patrick Williams because of a contract. You play him because he's earned a role through training camp and those other things. If that happens, great. Otherwise, having the worst contracts in the NBA, but still having max level cap space, still having the ability to create more. I've said this many times before over the years. You don't worry about moving Patrick Williams until that flexibility matters more than anything else. Right now, the Bulls can continue to create. They can create max level cap space each of the next 2 offseasons, even with Patrick Williams being on the books. You don't give up a first-round pick until you're sure of who you are and what you're building. then you may be able to be willing to give up a protected first-round pick to move off Patrick Williams. But by then, he could be an expiring contract anyway, and it doesn't matter, right? So we'll see. The last topic of the day that I want to get into before we get out of here is that Donovan Atwell. There was an interesting article that was put out in regards to Donovan Atwell, who a lot of Bulls fans are like, oh my God, Atwell, we got to give him the last roster spot. Oh, he's a shooter. I'd rather give it to Sellers. Atwell was a one-dimensional shooter that really doesn't do anything else. But apparently, Donovan Atwell actually did not sign his Exhibit 10 deal. So he's open to sign for any team right now, right? And there's some talk about that. Now, Atwell did look like a developmental shooter, shooting nearly 46% from three in college and in summer league. That's somebody that's worth developing and see what you are. The Bulls roster still lacks shooting. If you can develop a shooter long-term on that one, you take that shot, you develop that shooter, right? He doesn't dominate the ball, which is good. He doesn't need 15 shots to be effective. And he has an obvious NBA skill. The thing I say about all these players is who has an obvious NBA skill? For him, that's shooting, right? That's what that is, right? So while he may not be guaranteed to be an NBA level player, he is a player that is worth investing that time in development to see what he can turn into, right? So we'll see what happens in regards to that. I do think that hearing that Donovan Atwell didn't sign that Exhibit 10 deal means that he may be willing to bet on himself and think that maybe a team could give him more to that's there. So we'll see. Pimpin' Ain't Easy reported this, so take that with a grain of salt. We'll see what it means, right? But also, a recent court ruling did affect that NBA eligibility does mean Donovan Atwell could potentially return back to college. And that may be why he did not sign that Exhibit 10 deal. It's not even about him going to another NBA team. It could go to him going back for another year of college eligibility because we'll see. So we'll see what happens in regards to that and what Donovan Atwell does do. But I wanted to mention it on this show because I know that he has his fan base in this Bulls community that he earned through his summer league play. And a lot of Bulls fans would instantly be reacting if you saw Donovan Atwell sign with another team because Bulls fans would be like, but I thought. We'll see what happens there. But that's going to do it for today's episode, y'all. Make sure you guys sound off down below in the comment section how you feel about all the topics. How do you feel about the NBA Cup and that being a measuring stick in a lot of ways for the Chicago Bulls, each of the four matchups? Which of the four matchups has you most concerned? Which do you think is the most favorable for the Bulls? Let me know that down below as well. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bull Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.